Hey, it's Citizen Cosmos. We're Serge and Anna, and we discover Cosmos by chatting with awesome people from various teams and communities. Join us if you are curious how dreams and ambitions become code.
Hi everyone, it's Serge, and today we have Peng Zong with us today, the CEO and president of Tendermint Inc. If I'm correct, he was also Tendermint's first employee, and is the member of the newly formed board of directors at Tendermint. And if I'm also correct, you're the original developer of the Voyager wallet. Is that correct, Peng?
Hey Serge, hey Anna, it's great to be here. That is correct.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little bit what you do, tell everybody about your new position maybe straight away, or maybe just have some chit chat about what you're up to lately, and then how have you been, how is the situation with Corona before we jump into the questions. Where are you at, by the way?
Yeah, the situation with Corona's getting better. I'm in Toronto and in Canada, and the cases are going down every day, and we're able to go outside and go inside of grocery stores and such. But restaurants and movie theaters are still closed.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because we were at Berlin a while ago and Berlin got opened, and then we kind of moved from Berlin right now to a different place. Here is everything open as well, so we're hoping that we don't get somewhere where it's closed now. But anyways, so the first question that I do want to ask you is like the biggest thing that happened to you, as far as like I would put it. You became the CEO of Tendermint, and for about a month now. Care to share the story and how did it happen? How's it going so far?
Yeah, so I was promoted to CEO in a board call around the end of May. So I've been operating in that position for like almost 2 months now, like a month and a half or so. It's been really busy, and it's been quite a departure from my last role, which was very much focused only on visual design and user experience. So now I get a better idea of what everyone in the company is doing. It's a lot to keep track of, but I'm very happy to have a great team that is able to work on a lot of things independently. So I don't have to micromanage any of them. They're really awesome to work with. One of the biggest things I've been working with lately is getting everyone on the same page, getting everyone working on the same mission. We've had a lot of projects within the company, and it's a matter of figuring out which ones align with our mission and which ones could be made to align with our mission, because I think everyone still wants the same thing, which is to bring about the Internet of Blockchains. So it's mainly a matter of aligning people on that.
I think everybody who listens to this podcast, and yourself as well, everybody has heard how CEOs work in the fiat world. But obviously Tendermint is a bit of a special vehicle, I would say, right? It's a special company, and you just mentioned the Internet of Blockchains. And what is your mission as a CEO on a position at this vehicle, which is Tendermint, which is not a usual world company? What would you say your mission is for the world, for the company, or for the world, or whatever, how you want to describe it maybe?
Yeah, I think everyone at the company, and myself included, would still love to see the Internet of Blockchains happen, like I mentioned before. And how do we make that happen, right? There's IBC coming, but that's not being developed by our team. But there are a lot of ways that we can help that happen with the talents that we do have in the company. And my mission, right, there's three things. One is to continue to invest in engineering, whether that's by hiring engineers or by investing in external engineering teams. I want to continue improving the developer experience. I believe there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of usability of the SDK and how we approach developers, especially developers without blockchain experience. And then lastly, to grow the value of the Cosmos ecosystem. I mean, right now, the value of the Cosmos ecosystem is just the atom, but we hope there will be many more tokens in the future. So that's really exciting for me.
Do you think there will be additional tokens on the Cosmos Hub itself?
With IBC, I believe there will be lots and lots of different types of tokens on the hub. And I'm excited to see what people will end up putting on the hub.
I was referring more to the photon, right? If I'm not mistaken, the idea of the photon, is it still alive at all?
That idea is still alive in the minds of many. And we're working with ChainSafe, which has been spearheading the Ethermint project. So We haven't gotten into the details of token distribution or even what the token will be called yet. But, one of our original ideas way back then, I don't know, 2017 or something, that was that there will be a fee token on the hub and it would be called the Photon. But, 3 years have passed, which is an eternity in blockchain land. So I think we're still having to figure out what that might end up being. But we're really excited to bring the EVM to Cosmos through collaborating with ChainSafe.
Yeah, ChainSafe are quite cool. We actually recorded a podcast with them in regards to the Aragon chain, and it was really exciting. They shared a lot of insights. Going back to your position as a CEO, I know it might sound boring to you, but I think it's actually quite interesting to understand what you do, because like I said, it's an unusual vehicle. And is it the same, like in a normal, well, I don't want to use the word normal, maybe like in a real world of fiat, again, real world for me is blockchain. So in a fiat world, like when a CEO comes into a company, he usually either, sweeps the state clean, and like says everybody, okay, now we're going to change everything and rebuild everything from scratch. And there's the CEOs that come into the company and they kind of try to understand what's going on and build on top of what is already happening. So what kind of a CEO are you? Are you like the first kind or the second kind, or maybe expand a little bit if you want?
Oh yeah, there's definitely very little of sweeping the slate clean. I believe that what we've been working on and what the community is working on is very valuable and important. And my goal is to continue to build on that, right? As the community continues to build on IBC, continue to work on the Cosmos SDK, continue to build on Tendermint Core. A lot of those core engineers are not in our company anymore, but the tools we want to build and the community we want to build relies very heavily on those tools. So in my role as CEO, one of the things I've been working on, not sweeping the slate clean, but seeing how I can connect these tools and improve the user experience of using those tools. So we actually have an alpha product launch coming within a week or two. I think maybe by the end of the month. I can't announce it yet here, right? That would be that would be pre-announcing it. By the time this podcast goes out, I think people may already know what it is. And it's meant to be a tool built on top of the Cosmos SDK that makes it very simple and easy for any developer to build a blockchain. Yeah, coming from a design background, I really care about accessibility and ease of use and user experience. And with this sort of background, I've come into Cosmos, and I think the SDK could be much easier to use. So this product will make it much faster to get you from an idea to a blockchain on the realm of minutes instead of hours or days.
Sounds something very impressive, because obviously inside our project we use Cosmos SDK, and I'm familiar with a lot of people who use the Cosmos SDK in one way or the other. I even know projects who forked Cosmos SDK and use their own alternatives, but everybody's already saying that it's one of the easiest tools to use, and I'm really excited. And I can understand what you say when it's not easy. I can definitely relate to that as somebody who's not an engineer, who's like I try to learn, but I'm rubbish. My code doesn't go to production, that's for sure. but I can definitely relate, and I'm really excited to see.
Understand, I think the people who will listen to this podcast, if they're developers especially, they might already know how to use the SDK. And this tool is not meant for them. It's not meant for people already in the ecosystem. My goal with this tool is to bring Cosmos to mainstream developers, in particular web developers. There are such a huge number of web developers around the world today, and application developers. We did very, very rough research on this recently, and there's roughly maybe 24 million developers in the world. But when you talk about blockchain developers, I don't think it's 1 million. I don't even think it's 100,000. And then when you talk about Cosmos developers, that's like much less than that. Maybe, I don't know, within the thousands, or even sub 1,000. So there's this vast gap between people who already know and love Cosmos, us a few thousands, and the world who could benefit from a decentralized framework for building apps in the multi tens of millions. So that's my goal, right? To bridge that gap, to bring Cosmos to many more people. And we're hopeful that with a better initial tutorial, better experience, a much faster experience to getting your first blockchain running, we can make some of this happen.
I definitely agree that web development is the correct, well, in my opinion, anyways, that's the correct way to move forward because we saw what web development did to the internet, at least, right, and to the whole world of development.
Yeah. And what are we building here, right? It's the internet of blockchains. It shouldn't be a very difficult idea. I think with how amazing TCP/IP has made it to easily connect web pages and get people browsing around the entire web and figuring out all these use cases that are made possible by internet. By lowering the barrier to entry and by approaching more and more developers with the idea of a very easy to use, simple tutorial and scaffolding tool, I'm hoping to get the same explosion of ideas and tools and companies onto the internet of blockchains as the internet today.
Yeah, and we have, well, I'll say we as somebody who's like a Cosmos ecosystem member. So I think because we have IBC, which is to me is like a best replacement for TCP/IP in terms of the way you don't need permission anymore to go to from the one database to the other. That's it. It's like a win-win situation. And with what you say, I think that will be amazing if there is a tool that can like onboard a developer who doesn't have any blockchain experience, just like as a web developer, just boom, and he's there. And I think that's gonna be big. I'm really excited.
I'm really excited about the upcoming Stargate upgrade to the Cosmos SDK and to the hub, and the testnets that precede that, because like you said before, that includes IBC. It includes IBC 1.0. And this is really fulfilling the original vision that we set out 3 years ago. Blockchains that can very easily and permissionlessly connect to the Cosmos hub and to other hubs.
Yeah.
So the work of CEO is a tricky thing, really. Everything is on fire like all the time, or pretty much all the time. For you personally, what part of CEO role is more difficult, or you feel that it's a more important part of your role?
Yeah, I think there are many very difficult decisions that a CEO needs to make. One of them is related to alignment. So what do I mean by alignment? I mean that people in a company have expectations of other people, and I guess it's very closely related to communication. But if you don't communicate enough, then both sides are left with different sets of expectations of the other. And especially if you have a manager and an IC, individual contributor, who have different expectations of what they're supposed to deliver, that can cause a lot of conflict. So resolving that in a manner that makes the manager feel like they're being listened to by the employee, and to make the employee feel like they're empowered in what they're doing and they're passionate about their work is one of the things I'm focusing on.
Would you say that you had to make a decision already that you did not want to make by now in the last 2 months? Maybe not you not wanted to make, but a decision that you had a hard time like coming to it, but you had to do it as a CEO that you wouldn't have done as if you were not a CEO.
Yeah, I've had a number of these decisions, difficult decisions to make within the company, and that's expected of what the CEO is supposed to do. But what really helps me and what really helps everyone in the company is to align on a set of missions and to align on a vision. And so if you go into every decision with this vision in mind as the end goal, it becomes very clear how to make decisions. And of course, to make the best decisions, you need to communicate as much as often and over communicate whenever you can. Because especially with a remote company, what you grow to understand is that not everyone is listening. Not everyone is in the meeting with you. Not everyone checks that channel on Slack. If people reads what you're typing on Slack, maybe they didn't understand it, or maybe they scanned it over. So the more you're able to repeat yourself, exact same message, the more it actually helps your team align on the same goal.
I can really relate to what you just said. I think I can as well. We both went, oh my God, because I CEO'd a blockchain remote project before, and the most difficult thing I found is what you just said. Remote teams do not read what is there. It's just, especially, this is the crazy thing, especially the best developers, the best people on your team, they pay less attention to that. How do you fix that? Apart from repeating yourself, obviously you said you repeat yourself, but is there a way to automate that or to fix that?
Yeah, it's a difficult problem, and just blasting what you say in public channels or in group meetings with lots of people is not always the best way to talk to someone, right? it's valuable, but it's also very expensive to conduct as many one-on-ones as you can with people you feel like maybe are not, getting the message that you're putting out there for everyone else. So doing these one-on-ones, aligning people personally, understanding where they're coming from, and making them feel like they're listened to, that's another really important thing to do in a remote org. Because if you don't have these one-on-ones, right, people are not really going to voice to you, the things they're unable to voice in a group setting.
Yeah. Do you have some life hacks or some best methodics or things that you still, okay, it works really cool? Like this special thing or this special methodology, it's lots of them, but maybe you have some best for you.
It's probably a pretty common hack, but I think taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself is really important, right? You shouldn't make your life about work. And I'm not expecting anyone at my company to work overtime, to work on the weekend. And that expectation goes for any new person we hire. And it's something I try to reiterate to my employees who may be very excited about getting something done. But I always recommend for them to, take it slow. We're trying to build a long-term project here. We're trying to build something that will last, maybe even outlast all of us. And that's not going to happen if you burn yourself out, running a sprint instead of a marathon.
It's a really important thing, but what drives you apart from the work? What kind of hobby and what kind of things that you feel that, okay, it's keep me going and it's the best thing that I can do to motivate myself?
Especially with the coronavirus, with COVID-19, right? I don't get enough time outside. And also with working from home, like if you're not paying attention, you may end up spending all your days and all the daylight hours at home. So I think going out there, getting some fresh air, going for a hike if you can, or exercise outdoors in the way that you prefer is extremely important. I used to have other hobbies, but with the workload that a CEO puts on you, I have fewer hobbies now. And I think just getting some fresh air, seeing the sunset and enjoying nature, especially during the summer, right, is really important, and it'll help you keep grounded as you struggle with some maybe difficult decisions in work.
By the way, we didn't ask you how you actually got into your story, how you got into distributed ledger technologies or blockchain or whatever you want to call it, right? These days everybody has their own term. Well, what's your story? How did you get into that?
Yeah, I heard about Bitcoin a long time ago. I think in 2011 when I spent a lot of time on Hacker News back then, and then there's a post that popped up that says, "Oh, Bitcoin just hit $1." And everyone's like, what the hell is Bitcoin? And I was the same. That was sort of the first time I knew Bitcoin existed. Of course, I didn't invest. Nobody invests in Bitcoin back then unless you're totally crazy. But they're greatly rewarded now.
Well, I actually have a story for you. After you tell your story, I have a small story for you.
Yeah, and then over time, it gained more and more legitimacy in the early adopter crowd. I put a few dollars in Bitcoin, I think, in 2013, 14 or something. I don't remember anymore. Of course, I sold it all when it crashed around 2014. But around the same time, this guy contacted me over email. I used to work with him in a startup. I was actually contracted by a startup in 2010 to build a website for his team. And it was this office productivity app. But anyway, in 2014, I was contacted by this guy. He said, "Hey, I have this really interesting project and it's in blockchain. Do you want to work on it with me?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, blockchain seems really interesting." I just always felt intimidated that, I'm not, at least back then, I was not a developer. I mainly messed with, HTML, CSS, primarily web design stuff. So I always felt intimidated by cryptocurrency, and I had no idea where to get started if I wanted to actually dig into developing crypto. So I was like, all right, this guy seems like a sound developer. And I worked with him in the past, and I liked his idea in the past. So let's try it and see what happens. And turns out when was this? This was late 2015. Turns out this company was Tendermint, and that person I was talking to was Jay Kwan.
Wow.
And I was the first employee of that company.
That's really cool. What did you guys talk about? Is if it's not confidential, of course?
No, it's not confidential. For quite a while, until we stumbled across the idea of doing something like Cosmos, we really were trying to figure out potential use cases for blockchain. And one of the use cases that we thought might work was using blockchain in enterprise settings. So a lot of my early work was devoted to building some sort of blockchain monitoring interface for enterprise to use. We thought that maybe enterprises would be interested in a hosted blockchain solution in a similar way that web apps and such are hosted on Google Cloud or AWS, right? We would be the blockchain backend provider for companies that want to use it. Well, over time, that didn't really get anywhere. I believe Jay and Ethan, approached investors about this crypto for enterprise idea, and we didn't get much in the way of traction. The idea completely pivoted to something like Cosmos, which ended up being much more exciting and got much more traction with, I'm sure it's already been explained many times on your channel, with the sort of 17 million we raised in BTC and ETH over the course of 30 minutes. I think this is 2017, right? Yeah, 2017.
Yeah, it was 17. Yeah, it was 2017. I think as well.
Struggled for a long time trying to find good use cases for this project. And, doing a fundraiser was clearly the right way to go.
What was the most obscure use case that comes to your mind right now that you remember? The one that you were like, oh my God, really? Or maybe you came up with it yourself.
We didn't go that much into details about the various use cases of crypto. I was really very much focused on the enterprise blockchain hosting idea. And I think what's funny in some ways is that I think maybe we're just too ahead of the curve, because I believe there's still a market for enterprise blockchain hosting. It's an area we're still looking into actively within the company. So I think it's going to be funny later when I show my employees the sort of UI I built 5 years ago. Laugh at how much the space has moved on since then.
Yeah, we spoke with Ethan when we had Ethan on. He was saying the story about the whole idea behind the enterprise blockchain, and I think it was the single with his scam train that he spoke about that's related to that somehow. I can't remember how he related that, but I'm sure he somehow related that. But it's interesting because I don't know if it's the correct way to describe it, but I would say that Polkadot is probably looking more at enterprise in terms of what Cosmos does than. I don't know if it's the correct way to put it, because I'm putting it right now not from a technical point of view, but rather from somebody who's in the market for a while, and like obviously with the costs that Polka charges for security, and it's a bit harder in my opinion for small projects. Well, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it will be different, but let's see how it evolves. It sounds to me like they're more about enterprise, and Cosmos is more about right now about like the bigger picture.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that, Polkadot and Cosmos can interoperate. I believe, Chorus 1 has a contract with ICF to implement IBC onto Substrate. So, I'm open to any blockchain framework and blockchain team that wants to, interoperate with Cosmos chains through IBC. I think IBC really is the killer app. In the end, we're all really targeting the same people, right? While shared security in Polkadot seems like it may be very expensive, it's also, a really great way of securing high value chains. And, to be honest, like we've in Cosmos been thinking about shared security as well. And I'm sure we'll have some variation of shared security implemented onto the SDK. So there are many ways to, solve the same problem. As long as we're able to get projects to support IBC, I think we're going to see a lot of great things happen and a lot of ideas that we never could have thought could exist.
You mentioned yesterday on Twitter, you mentioned a decentralized Twitter. I have some super secret information, but by the time this podcast come out, it's not going to be secret anymore. Do you think that it's possible to make a decentralized version of Twitter using the Cosmos SDK, or?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think there are, from what I can tell, there's several teams working on this. Whether it's the decentralized Twitter or decentralized Slack or decentralized Facebook, all these ideas have been going through people's minds in various capacities around the ecosystem, and I'm excited to see which solution ends up winning out. I think some of the people listening to this call might also realize that I built something like this in the recent past. This thing called Dither, right? It was a very early alpha version of a decentralized Twitter built on the SDK. We're now repivoting what Dither is and thinking of a way to make it even more useful for people. One of the core issues I found while developing Dither as maybe almost an exact Twitter clone, or as exact as possible on the SDK, is that Twitter is built for very high amounts of interaction with low amounts of transactions with low value. I'm not saying that, tweets are worthless, but what I'm saying is that compared to a transaction where you send 1,000 Atom to somebody and you compare that to a tweet, generally, in most cases, the transaction sending tokens is much more valuable than the contents of the tweet. And so if you zoom out and look at Twitter as it exists today, there's a massive scalability problem with the current SDK and how it would be able to support something as big as Twitter. Are you expecting, all the validators of a Dither zone, for example, to store, these hundreds of millions and billions of messages, right? While, the Cosmos Hub currently doesn't even have that many transactions, and validators are complaining that these blocks are taking up too much hard drive space.
What about using an external storage like IPFS or anything else? Well, obviously we need some incentives, and let's imagine that Filecoin is existing already, so it's in place. I mean, it could be like a variant to move everything. I'm not sure if Dither actually uses IPFS or not, because I've used it I've looked at the code briefly. I haven't tried it out, so I've only looked around it.
Yeah, I think you brought up some great possible solutions, right, with IPFS or Filecoin. Dither uses none of those. It's really like an early proof of concept and actually uses Google Firebase to collect Dither-specific transactions that happen on the hub. So that's clearly not the right solution there, but we just wanted to get that out there to see what could be possible using just the memo field of Cosmos Hub transactions. But yeah, the ideal solution is definitely its own blockchain with its own custom message types and a decentralized storage method.
That sounds like, I'm not going to say anything, but it's cool, and you'll like in a few days.
I'm hearing your hints here. I'm hearing a lot of hints, so I'm excited to see.
I'm going to stop, but... An off-top question. It's not off-top because it relates to design, and obviously I've seen you describe yourself as a minimalist a few times in a few places. Well, you're obviously a professional when it comes to user UI or UX or whatever. I always get those two words cross. You're probably gonna kill me if I mix them up, but for a non-looker, sometimes UI and UX get crisscrossed. But anyways, the question doesn't relate to that. It relates to the fact that in terms of products and design, in our sort of circles, we've been discussing lately a lot blockchains and off-chain work, and the idea that blockchain should be designed in a way where if somebody's cut from the centralized power source and is cut from the state, he should still be able to work somehow, or sign transactions, for example, that he can broadcast them later to the network when he's connected and he's synced. But those tools have to be comfortable and they have to be in place, because right now, when we look at most blockchains, well, pretty much no one has that. There is about 3 or 4 blockchains that are more or less able to provide some tools to work with an off state, and then anyways, I think you get where I'm going with this. Is Cosmos planning anything like that?
So first of all, I agree with you fully. I think not everyone has an always-on internet connection. There are people in countries living with poor internet infrastructure, which makes that impossible. Or let's say they're traveling, and their connection is on and off, but they still want to be productive. And I think supporting, an offline first user experience is really important. I'm not working on this. I don't believe anyone on my team is working on it. But, especially as we get more developers building using the Cosmos SDK, this situation is going to come up more and more. Excited that you're thinking about this. And we definitely need to come up with a solution for this, for Cosmos chains. I think it's mainly UI based, right? I mean, you can already, using the CLI, create as many offline transactions as you want to broadcast at a later state. But that sort of functionality is not really being revealed to blockchain users or token holders who are not familiar with the CLI. But yeah, I'll give a concrete example, right? Before we move on, I think for those people who are maybe less technical, maybe a concrete example of this is, let's say you have a notes app on your phone even that's powered by the SDK. You're definitely going to want to be able to create notes offline when you don't have access to a cell signal or Wi-Fi, right? Requiring a notes app to need to be always online and connected to the chain is really suboptimal. So this sort of feature that Serge is proposing is something that needs to exist.
Yeah, what is the most important thing for you to support best quality user experience? Is it like something that we need some big object that we need to try to do first, or maybe something else? Just to say, okay, it's the best quality we can provide for the moment in terms of user experience.
Okay, yeah. So this question is really broad. I want to focus on one part of it, which is user experience of the SDK, developer experience. I think that we want to have an internet of blockchains, but unless building a blockchain is really easy, right? I think one benchmark for me is, when I was like 11 and 12 years old, I got into web design. And, I took a class on HTML, and it was pretty easy to figure out how to use HTML. I use tables, right? And I grabbed GIFs from the internet and I stuck them in this table. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Now it's a website. Having future 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds be able to actually use the SDK and build a blockchain and deploy it. This is the sort of level of usability we need to reach with blockchain development if we want to have any sort of greater traction, right? We need to make it super accessible. We need to make it easy to use. For people, I understand a lot of, Cosmos documentation is in English right now, but we need to translate it, right, to other languages as well, because we want this to be a worldwide web, right, of blockchains. So any way we can make it easier, take less time, require, less complex terminology, ideally require no, background in blockchain development at all, and we reframe it as, a way of building a decentralized app, the sort of more traction we'll get, and the more blockchains will enter our ecosystem. You might argue that, with young people, they're not going to build anything of value. Well, that's true. But to be able to get people started and to introduce them to something they can use as a beginner and make them feel like they're empowered while using it is the way, to in the future get them excited about a career, about building this to serve real business use cases, in a serious product that will solve real problems.
You mentioned a lot, obviously, interactions with blockchain, and you mentioned for developers. And can you imagine for a second, or maybe have some kind of visualization, obviously, coming from the UI part of field as well, how it will be for the developers of the future who are still kids right now? Will they be like, put their VR glasses on and interact with the Cosmos SDK from inside of the VR, or how will it look? Can you imagine anything like that, or is it too far-fetched?
Yeah, I can totally imagine that. It is quite far out. I have an Oculus Quest headset myself. It's very early on, right? It's only for early adopters right now, but I'm assuming over time, as hardware becomes more powerful, the device becomes smaller and lighter, more easy to use. I hear Apple, right, is coming out with AR glasses in the next couple of years or so, which sound like they're going to be much lighter and easier to use and more accessible, than current VR goggles today, primarily because you can see through them to see the outside world. I think there's plenty of opportunities for blockchain to get involved and to be used through AR and VR. I don't know what it looks like right now. But, I would expect that even 20 years out, a lot of people are still going to be developing code in front of some sort of screen with a keyboard, hardware keyboard in front of them. I don't think everything will be happening in VR.
Totally. Have you seen the GPT-3 demo on Twitter from the, what's his name? He showed how he didn't reveal the code, and he said you could only basically what it was in the demo, the guy just writes, give me a Google sign button in yellow, big, and I want in the middle to say subscribe, and he writes that, and then he presses enter, and it gives him the code straight. That's amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. I saw that. It got posted in our company Slack as well. It's really incredible, how far AI has gotten. I'm excited to see what happens to it in the near future. I actually signed up to get beta access to GPT-3. There's this OpenAI website, I think. That's where people are getting access and using GPT-3 in the various, sort of small hobbyist projects that get viral on Twitter. So if I get a chance to try it, I'll give it a shot. I don't know how that relates to to blockchain yet, but it's clear that content creation, at least some sort of content creation, is already possible with GPT-3. Given like a short text summary of what you want, they can build an entire article about it, or they can build, like you said, a button or a set of HTML elements based on what you described. I don't think it's going to be replacing jobs, especially in design, anytime soon. It's pretty funny looking at that tool as a designer, because I've had many cases without an AI, design being poorly translated into code. So that was pretty funny.
I can imagine you say, give me a blue, and it keeps giving you like red or whatever, like something silly like that. Like, that's blue. Especially with subjectiveness, and AI, like if it's open AI, where you have like a lot of subjective opinions and, But anyways, let's talk about Looney for a second. And obviously it was called Voyager back in the day. If I'm correct, this is information I only personally found out when me and Anna started to research information about you before the podcast. I didn't actually know that you were involved in Looney. Is that correct at all?
Yeah, that's correct. Before Looney, there was Cosmos Voyager. And before Cosmos Voyager, it was called Cosmos UI. Before Cosmos UI, it was called Basecoin UI. And before Basecoin UI, it was called Tendermint UI. It's gone through very many revisions. And I'm not sure if the Git history has been deleted or not, but if you go through the Looney source code, you might be able to find some of these initial commits, way back in 2015, where it was meant to be an enterprise blockchain explorer. So that's the sort of high-level history of it. I guess what most people might be interested in is how, Looney became its own separate product outside of Tendermint. So it was originally built in-house by me way back in 2015. And as we expanded over time, especially, after we did the Cosmos fundraiser, well, I guess before the Cosmos fundraiser, we already had this question in our mind of, how are people going to interact with Cosmos blockchains? And of course, the obvious answer is a wallet. So we knew a wallet needed to exist. And, after we pivoted away from enterprise blockchain hosting, right, we decided, okay, we need a wallet of some sort. We're going to call this a wallet. It's called Basecoin UI, but right. And I was working on that with Matt Bell, who is part of Nomic right now and working on, I think, a Bitcoin sidechain. But anyway, we built this wallet. It was usable for the various testnets that we had way back then. And then over time, right, as our team expanded, especially after the fundraiser, we got more people to work on this wallet, make it look great, make it more usable. We started supporting features like, on-chain governance and, delegating tokens to validators. I guess even back then, we were one of the very first proof-of-stake projects. So we had to come up with our own way of thinking of how people would interact with validators and how to make staking as easy and as simple as possible. So that's always been the purpose of Basecoin UI, which later became Cosmos UI and later became Cosmos Voyager. Like, as we got closer to, the first launch of Cosmos Hub, right? Cosmos Hub 1, we had this thing called Cosmos Voyager, and people used it to interact with the hub. Over time, it became clear that, there were very many great ideas within the company as to how we can make Cosmos more accessible and how we can make the technology stack more powerful. And we had to think about how to allocate resources. And there was a discussion that happened where, we decided as a company back then that we wanted to really focus on being core infrastructure. And that meant that a project like Cosmos Voyager was in danger of not having enough funding, not being able to hire enough people to be able to build the best wallet ever for Cosmos chains. And so 2 employees at the time who were working on Looney, more than me at the time, because I was moving more towards corporate design and user experience, they decided, with the help of the Interchain Foundation, to spin out, to form, Looney Systems, and to take the original Cosmos Voyager source code and continue maintaining it under the rebranded name of Looney. So those 2 people, Jordan Bibla and Fabian Weber, they're really great to work with. I think he was a great designer. Jordan was a great designer, and Fabian is a great developer. And we still talk to them. They're still on our Slack. And we're still figuring out ways of collaborating as our team right now focuses on getting more developers to the Cosmos ecosystem. They're all going to need a wallet. So we're still in discussions about how we can work together to ensure that developers are very well supported by things like wallets and other infrastructure that's needed, like block explorers, to launch a successful chain.
By the way, why was the name Voyager changed to Luna? I mean, Voyager sounds so much cooler.
Well, that was not my decision, right? Because we had fewer resources within the company to work on Voyager. The Looney team that was funded by the ICF sort of had free reign to name it anything they wanted. I believe they're also focusing on, being the best staking interface for all proof-of-stake blockchains. So maybe it's better than not Cosmos Voyager, because that ties them too closely just to Cosmos.
Yeah. You mentioned, I think it was you who mentioned interaction design, right? I'm not sure if it was on Twitter or if it was in one of your blogs where I saw that. Are you planning to implement interaction design, or is it already implemented somehow in the Cosmos Hub?
Yeah, interaction design is a really broad topic. I believe it maybe you found it on my website or such. As CEO, right, I have less day-to-day work involving interaction design, but it's a very broad topic. I think one way of describing it is any way you have of interfacing with the Cosmos ecosystem is an instance of interaction design. So whether that's you following Adriana, for example, and reading her Today in Cosmos tweets, or whether that's you clicking on the Cosmos website and reading about what exists in the Cosmos ecosystem, or if you download a wallet that supports Cosmos atoms and uses those atoms to perform a staking transaction or vote on a proposal. Like anytime you're using anything related to Cosmos, it's really a part, within the umbrella of interaction design. So now that you see how broad it is, I think making interactions with Cosmos as pleasant as possible, as intuitive as possible, and as headache-free as possible is one of the goals of the company. And I mean, Tendermint cannot control every single access point to Cosmos, right? It's a community project. So it's about working with the community, helping out where we can, to make the process of discovering the SDK and using the SDK easier for everyone. It's a very ambitious goal, but we'll help out however we can.
Yeah, speaking about goals and community, I think it was Adriana who told us that I'm born by the community. I know that there are a lot of open positions at Tendermint right now. So could you tell us what are you looking and why, and who is the person who can just have a perfect match with Tendermint?
Okay, perfect match with Tendermint. Well, that's a very tall order. We're not specifically, at least for the non-developers, we're not specifically looking for people with Cosmos experience. I think it's really great to welcome more diverse opinions and to be able to get other perspectives from outside the blockchain space into the company. Because one of the biggest problems I think blockchain has right now is its image to the world at large, right? The recent Bitcoin hack on Twitter has not been helpful in that respect, right? It makes it look like Bitcoin is related to scams. And that's the connection that's maybe in a lot of people's minds. So the more we can help people understand, whether if even that's by hiring people who are outside of blockchain and get them into this space, the more we can, adequately tell the story we want to tell about blockchain development and why it matters. So yeah, I don't think the perfect candidate exists, but we're hiring a lot of people primarily because there are deliverables we need to make to the ICF. We're working on several projects that I think will add, greater liquidity to the Cosmos ecosystem, whether that's through new types of tokens or just by bringing on more people, more, potential token holders to the Cosmos ecosystem. So we have nothing to announce in these areas yet, but we'll have more over time.
I have a bit of a controversial question, I think, related to the board of directors. I'm going to be devil's advocate here. Don't you think that the board of directors actually centralizes things rather than decentralizes them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe it wasn't clear enough in the way we presented it, so we can work on that. But Up until, up until the board was announced, actually the only board member we had was Jay Kwan, right? He was the sole board member and the CEO. So that actually means that any effort we take to create a board with more than one person is actually further decentralizing the, the ownership of the company and the leadership of the company. So we're actually doing what we can, to decentralize, because before there was only one person on the board. I'm happy to say that there was a recent board call, I believe, actually just Monday of this week, in which we expanded the board seats to 5, and now we have 5 people. We're adding, we're adding Claire Hov, who is a former VP of Udemy, and she also worked previously at Apollo GraphQL, and we've also added Nick Tomeno, founder at One Confirmation and previously at Coinbase. I think both of them will really help us grow as a company, because they come in with perspectives of working at much larger companies, and they can see possible trajectories for Tendermint that can lead us in a positive direction. So I'm really happy to work with them on the board meetings.
Why specifically these people? Was there any reason? Or?
Yeah, of course, we talked to our team internally and then asked for potential leads on people who may want to join a board. So that's where some of them come about. And then for Nick specifically, he's one of our Series A investors, and then he expressed interest in taking a closer look at what we're doing and helping guide us.
I know from my own experience that working with a decentralized community is probably one of the toughest tasks I've had to do, because you have to, especially when you have a project which is an ICO and you're trying to be decentralized about everything you do, and you're trying to do everything in an open way, upkeeping with all those. I will come back to the board of directors in a second. You will see how I'm going to connect this. It's not easy to connect all the dots. You have the investors, you have the series, maybe the pre-sale round investors, then you have the open sale, the ICO investors, then you have just the community who's came to the market later on, then you have the developers, and so on and so on. It's not like there's no hierarchy really, just a lot of everybody all together. So the question is, which does relate to the board of directors in that sense, do you think it's crazy at this stage, or at any stage at all, to say to add to the board of directors people who are just regular members of the community, to come and say, okay, let's have a vote, on-chain vote on the Cosmos hub to propose a validator, somebody, or maybe somebody who's not even running a validator, maybe just some random person, to say, okay, let's get this guy into the board of directors, and everybody says yes with their stake. And does it make sense? I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense. I think if you're asking specifically, if we can just add community members to that Tendermint board of directors, I think I have to get back to you on that. I have to talk to our team first. But in terms of using the software that we build, to create operations, right? I think it's a really compelling idea. I think, there is a way to use something like the Cosmos SDK in a similar way to Gaia, right? To actually have Gaia or something like Gaia act as a corporation, where token holders are actually shareholders, where something like the token on the chain is actually called one share, right? And depending on the number of shares you have, you can influence decisions through on-chain governance. And there's definitely some way of mapping that to, a real corporation. Or maybe in this case, we should call it a distributed autonomous organization, right? DAOs. So I'm really interested about researching this area, and I think it's a really great use case of the SDK. So I'm excited to see what people come up with in this respect. It's something we're thinking about internally as well. How much do we want to use our own product? There's been discussions of creating a Tendermint blockchain, just to serve the employees of the company. And we'll play around with that and see what sort of maybe polls or on-chain governance decisions we can make using this sort of mini employee-only blockchain.
Because I'm personally excited about Aragon Chain starting to work together with Ethermint. That will bring the DAOs to Cosmos, obviously.
Yeah, I think Aragon has had a really clear idea, and I'm excited to see what they're executing on, especially as they bring over all their smart contracts over to Ethermint.
I mean, that's the only reason, if I'm not mistaken, ChainSafe started to develop Ethermint because of Aragon Chain. essentially, and then it became they got a grant from the IC. I'm not really sure about the story here, but this is what I know as an outsider. So, but doesn't matter really. I have a question which unrelates to all of that, unrelates to Cosmos at all. Question about Prism, because I'm a bit of well, a lot of people describe me as somebody with like strong views. I don't know what that means, but whatever. And I could say I'm probably a little bit anti like corporation kind of guy and all that. I don't know what it means, obviously. Anyways, but what's about Prism? Can you tell us what is it, and does it still exist? Do you plan to work on Prism more? Because to me it seemed really interesting.
Yeah, so Prison Break came out of Edward Snowden's revelations about NSA spying on basically everyone and anything they can get their hands on. And that was in 2002. It gained quite a bit of traction. It reached number one on Reddit, our technology. And it's gotten millions and millions of views. I'm not maintaining it anymore myself, but it's being run by a community, which I think is really cool. I guess it's sort of one of the first open source projects I've built that is sort of running by itself now. So I'm really proud of what they're doing, maintaining the list of projects that can be used instead of these closed source proprietary projects that may or may not be sending all of their data or giving access to various state governments. I still find that, a really compelling reason to use decentralized software. Happy to be more directly involved in building tools that work against government surveillance and support privacy.
What personally, sorry, for me it's like really touchy topic, because I think that's the only reason, that is one of the main reasons why I personally been in this space for about like 10 years. Well, since the beginning, pretty much the very beginning, maybe like I missed the first year and a half or whatever. What got you into that subject? I mean, obviously government surveillance, but what personally motivated you to create that? Was it pain? Was that something that happened in your life, or was that something you came across? I mean, you don't have to answer, obviously, but I'm curious what motivated you to create Prism.
There was definitely no personal experience that led me to create Prism. It just, I feel and still feel, very idealistic about the importance of privacy. I've read and seen various ways lack of privacy is abused by people with authority over those without authority, right? I don't have any quotes to mind, but there's, when you have access to all the information about someone, you can easily build a case against them, using selective pieces of information that point to them as being a guilty party when they're not actually at fault. It's just too much power to have other people. So I'm supportive of ways where, the common person can use tools that safeguard them against abuses of power and privilege.
Yeah, and we have the kind of traditional question about free projects that you're excited about right now. And obviously it's blockchain project, but not related to Cosmos or Ethereum or Bitcoin. What projects?
Yeah, there are a lot of really interesting projects out there, but I think two in particular that have caught my eye is Near Protocol and Avalanche. I think Near Protocol is doing a really great job of making their tools very accessible to JavaScript and TypeScript developers, in which there are a lot of in the world. And this is the sort of developer experience I'm hoping that the Cosmos ecosystem is able to provide as well. Having very simple, actionable tutorials that solve real problems using a stack that a lot of people are familiar with. Yeah, they look pretty interesting. And then with Avalanche, their consensus protocol looks very elegant and clean, and it's easy to understand. So I'm excited to see what comes of that. I mean, they're both, in the end, potential competitors to the Cosmos ecosystem, but all of their code and all of our code is open source. So, I'm just happy for the blockchain ecosystem as a whole to move forward with these areas of research.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think Avalanche is very interesting. I was excited a lot when I first heard Professor, I cannot pronounce Emmer's surname. When I first heard him talk, it was very, very interesting to see like how it's different from, in consensus terms, from what existed then. Is there anything else you want to share with us that we didn't ask you maybe?
There are so many projects we're working on internally that I'd love to share, but I'm not able to share yet. Just follow our Twitter handle, and I'll be able to share them as soon as we can.
Thanks, and thanks for agreeing to come on and grab a piece of your own time, because obviously, as you said, CEOs are busy, and I hope that we didn't steal your time from the sunshine, which was your obviously free time. And I know we don't have a lot of it, so thanks for agreeing to come on, and thanks for sharing the info with us.
Hey, Serge and Anna, thank you for bringing me on, and thank you for asking these questions. I think the community probably wants to hear something from me, right? Being the CEO of Tendermint, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that you guys have given me to do that.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody who's listened to us today, and join us next time for Citizen Cosmos. Bye bye.